Good afternoon. My name is Tyler Barker. I'd like to welcome you to our What's Buzzin at Georgia Tech webinar series. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Dean Stephanie Ray. She'll be talking about student diversity programs and what that looks like on campus and how we can best support your student who may be going through a unique challenge or underserved population. If you have any questions for Dean Ray, please feel free to utilize the Q&A chat feature. We'll be sure to get to those questions at the end of the PowerPoint. Once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature, and then we'll get to those at the end. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dean Stephanie Ray.
Thank you, Tyler. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to What's Buzzing at Georgia Tech, the unique challenges and needs of underrepresented and underserved populations. I serve as Associate Dean of Students and Director for the Office of Student Diversity Programs, and I have 35 years of experience serving students from these specific populations. 25 of those years have been at Georgia Tech. I also lead the inclusion, advocacy, and support areas in student engagement and well-being. So not only do I have my office, we have the Women's Resource Center headed by Assistant Dean Melanie DeMayer, the LGBTQIA Resource Center headed by Tigra Anna and Camilla Brewer, and also the Veterans Resource Center, which we're excited because we're getting ready to celebrate Veterans Day later this week, led by Dr. David Ross. The objectives of today's workshop is that participants will learn how students from underrepresented and underserved communities experience college. And also participants will consider how to support students from underserved and underrepresented populations. This may be the first time that you've heard the term underserved and underrepresented. I personally do not like to use the term minority because people who look like me, people who are brown and Black, are not minorities in the greater world. So that's why I don't like to use those terms. A little bit about diversity and inclusion. At Georgia Tech, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, the dimensions of diversity, this is not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted you to get an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about dimensions of diversity here at Georgia Tech. Next, I want to share some demographic information. The overall Georgia Tech demographics will look a little bit differently when you look at Georgia Tech all over the world, which is about close to 50 students. But when I do demographic data, I look at what is present on the Georgia Tech campus, the Atlanta campus. So this is what, in terms of different demographics, this is what students would experience while being on our Atlanta campus. These are the top 10 countries outside of the United States represented at Georgia Tech. This list changes from year to year. For example, last year, Spain was not one of the top 10 countries. This year, it is. Also, looking at our enrollment by citizenship, as you can see, Georgia Tech, we're so fortunate to have an international student population that is about 22%, which is pretty high for a college or university in the United States. I wanted to have a brief discussion on the difference between diversity and inclusion. What I just shared with you, the percentages, the numbers, the representation, who's here, who's not here, that's diversity. Diversity doesn't mean a whole lot by itself. What we're trying to focus more on is inclusion, making sure that everyone feels that they matter, feels that they count, feels like they have a place at the table. Not only will you have a place at the table, but you will be able to be served the food you want to eat. If you're on keto, we have keto for you. If you're vegan, we have vegan meals, vegetarian. gluten-free. You have whatever it is that you need in order to have a place at the table. Whoops. I'm going to tie my next conversation into the triple and now the quadruple pandemic, and how students from underserved and underrepresented populations experience the quadruple pandemic quite differently. In fact, I get somewhat disturbed when I hear the term post-pandemic. While some may feel that we're living in a post-pandemic, others feel that they're still in the center of the pandemic. I personally lost a family member about 3 weeks ago to COVID, and I have lost other family members to COVID. But I want you to understand that there has always been disparities in healthcare when it comes to underrepresented and underserved communities. But COVID-19 shed new light to an already national problem. It was like going into a dark cavern with a torch that was ignited by the brightest star in our solar system. Faculty, staff, and our students were thrust without warning into the first pandemic. The second pandemic was already underway, but on May the 26th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered after an arrest. The George Floyd protest movement began hours after his death as a bystander's video went viral all over the world. In the United States, 2,000 cities took part in the protest. Atlanta was not an exception. Then the protest went global. And right here on Georgia Tech's campus, many of our students took part in the movement. I know some students who were actually jailed, some of my student leaders. And all the time, faculty and staff were thinking, why can't they just go to class? What do you mean you can't sleep? What do you mean you can't focus on your schoolwork? And then we were hit by the third pandemic. You see, Asians all over the globe were accused of starting the COVID-19 pandemic, even referred to as the Asian virus or the Chinese virus. Since February, Asians and people of Asian descent around the world have been subjected to attacks, beatings, violent bullying, threats, racist abuse, and discrimination. I bring this up because my office was definitely impacted by all of these pandemics. My office actually advises the Asian American Student Organization. I personally worked with students who were afraid to come out of their residences, particularly international Asian students. They felt that they were going to be attacked, deported, all of these things. It was very traumatic for them. I want you to understand that the pandemic was experienced by different populations in different ways. I'm going to show you some data on how students were challenged mentally. This research right here comes from the Active Mind survey. As you can see, students supporting their peers should be a very positive experience. But for some, supporting their peers can be or was something that was very exhausting, culminating in negative mental outcomes for all. COVID also impacted physical activity. People were not getting out. They were staying in on our campus. Those first-year students, many of them were alone in their residence, afraid to come out, isolated. Also, there was increased stress and anxiety. And 25% of students surveyed said that their depression significantly increased. This is a national survey. This was not a survey that was just conducted at Georgia Tech. So I want to keep that in mind. Also, I want you to know that 33 alarming college student mental health statistics. This came out June of 1927, is that 64% of students drop out of college due to mental health problems. About 75% of mental illnesses are already established by the age of 24. So a lot of that happens during college, right? And during COVID-19, 9 in 10 students have experienced negative mental health symptoms. 48% of students believe that mental health problems have impacted their education. And nearly 30% of college students have depression, and that's from the Healthy Minds survey. Something that is really significant and I think is really positive is that 73% of faculty members would like to have additional education on student mental health. And right now we have a new program that is being supported by the University System Board of Regents called Mental Health First Aid. That's where faculty, staff, and students will be trained on the mental health and other health needs of our students, of our entire community. So I've already been through my training to support faculty and staff on campus, and it was very enlightening. Also, in the year 2019-2020, 36.9% of students receiving mental health services considered suicide. So I want you to know, and I bring this up because I want you to understand that students from underrepresented and underserved communities had a significant increase in their thoughts about suicide, in their attempts, and suicide completion. I'm going to talk to you about something near and dear when I get finished with this section. Suicide deaths by race increased, as I already said, in the African American and Hispanic communities. They also increased in the LGBTQIA+ communities. What I want to address right now is talk about the stigma around mental health disorders and counseling services and seeking help. Then I need families, we need you to partner with us. One of the roles of my job is that I'll probably meet with 4 to 5 students a day from all backgrounds. And I would say 90% of those conversations involve students talking about their mental health. I meet with students who have just been released from the hospital, and they're trying to return back to school, all of that. And a lot of times what students say is they sometimes don't involve their families, or they're afraid to involve their families, or they just have a fear that families just don't understand. Let me share a little bit of my own personal experience. I am an only child from a middle-class family. I would say that my mother would consider herself a God-fearing woman. And when I went to my mother to ask for some help for my anxiety, she always brushed it off and said that God will help me. And I know that God has for me, but I also believe that there are people that are also put in place by our higher beings that we sometimes worship, and a lot of us do not worship anyone, and that's all good. I'm not saying this is not about worship. This is about my personal experience and how I dealt with stress and anxiety as a college student. My mother's cure for my anxiety was to go outside and walk around the house 20 times. All I have to say is that is not helpful. Parents, Georgia Tech needs you to partner with us. I have found in working with different cultures, it's most helpful for the student and for the families if we can partner together. What I try to do, because we know the students are adults and most offices can't even call parents, but what I try hard to do is to get that student to schedule a joint meeting with the student, myself, and the family so we can all figure out a way to support our students. But let me tell you, depression, anxiety, suicide, it's in everybody's culture. No culture is exempt. My mother used to tell me that Black people don't kill themselves. But she was wrong. I've had suicide in my family. I've had suicide with other loved ones, with students that I care deeply about. Suicide is something that happens to all of us. I also want to talk about we need to get around over the stigma about mental health disorders and seeking help, right? We need to steer our students in the way to be help seeking. And any assistance that we can get from families will always lead to better outcomes. Also, mental health is often considered as secondary to other student needs. It's just as important as any other student need. I want to share a chart with you. This is mental health challenges most college students report facing amid the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, we see the anxiety, social isolation, or loneliness. We saw that a lot, particularly with students who were living on their own, both in the graduate and undergraduate populations. Depression, trouble concentrating, inability to cope with stress, difficulty handling emotions, unhealthy social media use, and sometimes suicidal ideation. So when I prepared this program, this workshop, and I must say that LaRonda Hollis, a case manager in the counseling center, she and I presented a workshop similar to this to the University System of Georgia. But these were some of the underrepresented and underserved student communities that we focused on at the time. And there are others. Cultural implications. What might be some cultural implications when we're talking about our students being underserved and underrepresented? One, sometimes if you're a first generation student, you may not know where to go ask for help because sometimes your family may not be a choice for you. We have several students who sometimes don't have family. We have students in foster care that go to Georgia Tech. Other cultural implications is how your family feels about taking medication, for example, or even asking for help. It could be that families don't like taking one's family business outside the family, right? And that means that students may not ask outsiders, even people like me at Georgia Tech, for help. Other cultural implications for me, it was about, it centers, a big piece of me centers around religion. One of the biggest cultural implications for me around COVID is that my church in Metro Atlanta has still not opened. Still not opened. And in my family, in terms of funerals, we're so used to sending someone off with a homegoing ceremony, a homegoing celebration. And we haven't been able to do that. And it's through these celebrations that we're able to heal and move on. But because that wasn't happening, a lot of us were stuck. I want to share with you, and just because I consider myself as having some level of cultural competence, and I do have an understanding that, and we all need to have an understanding that cultures operate differently in society. And let's take the concept of Eastern medicine versus Western medicine, for example. I am someone who believes in all medicine, not just a Western approach. I'm going to share a story. I dealt with a student who was a Korean national, and everybody thought she should be placed in a hospital. Whoops. Her mother came down from Korea and stayed with her a few months. The first thing the mother did was changed her apartment to the other side of the building so we get more sunlight. She worked with the daughter on her exercise. They created a regime where they both took part in every day. And of course, she cooked her daughter appropriate meals. At first, I was a little bit skeptical, but I also want to let you know that that student did extremely well. She was able to graduate with honor. And since her graduation, the student has visited me twice, coming back to America for different conferences to visit me while she's here. So culturally, they may be different approaches to doing things, but as long as they end in good results, just to be aware. Woo, this one. Let me breathe. Woo. Parents, our children are different from us in many ways. I think some of it is probably a little bit positive. But what I mean by this is there are definite generational issues. We were taught, or at least I was taught, to tough it out. I asked my mother for advice, for help. She said, Stephanie, you're smart. You figure it out. And luckily for me, I figured it out, right? I was able to figure it out. These students are very different from us. They were exposed to totally different things. For probably the first 10 or 12 years of my life, I grew up on 3 channels. It was a while before cable even got to my neighborhood. We played outside. We didn't play video games. We didn't have cell phones. We certainly didn't have social media. The only people that we were able to compare ourselves were those people who were in our immediate realm of influence, right? But these students are different. And I think that a lot of this, their access to so much information at one time this is just my opinion, has caused a great deal of anxiety from them. So our approach, what worked for us, may not work for them. So just keep that in mind. And I think many of you probably already know that. Next, I want to talk about the relationship that you have with your student. I wish I could go back and have a conversation with you before your student came to Georgia Tech. The advice that I would give you is that I would advise you to predetermine expectations of your student before they come to Georgia Tech. And I think a lot of times you don't think about that because it's always been okay, right? For example, if you expect your student to share their grades with you, say that up front. If you expect them to contact you once a month, every 2 weeks, whatever that is, establish that up front. And I really don't think it's too late to do that now. I always like to tell parents that you are the parent. You are in charge. You set the rules. You lay down the expectations. Also, as you know, encourage your student to be able to talk to you, to have a relationship with you, to have conversations with you. But parents, as you know, we were young once, right? We all were young. Sometimes it's just easier to talk to someone else, even another adult, other than your parent. And so that's why people like us are here. And that's why, again, it's so important that um, that we have those relationships with students so we're able to have conversations with you. So again, that's why I always encourage students, maybe we should call your parents and bring them in to see what they think. Academic struggles. There's a lot here to unpack. Students from underserved and underrepresented communities may have slightly different academic struggles than other students. I'm going to give you an example. If you are a person, a student of color, or if you are a woman, if you are an individual who identifies as trans, for example, you may be one of a few students in a classroom of 200 students that are like you. And that presents a challenge if you are someone who is from an underrepresented and underserved community, because a lot of times we are looking for community. We're looking for people who look like us. That's important for us. And then once that happens, we're able to reach out and branch out into other communities. Students report to me that they sometimes are challenged in their classrooms, especially when group projects are assigned and no one picks them to be in their group. And they don't know what to do because they're not selected. And sometimes the people that are left over, so it's like being on the baseball team when you're younger, you're not picked. You know how that feels, right? And then all of a sudden the unpicked people may form their own group. It may be very difficult for underrepresented students to have conversations with their faculty. And that's one of the things that our office does along with OMED. We teach students how to have conversations with their faculty. Other unique challenges that students from underrepresented or underserved communities might face is oftentimes I meet students who didn't even only had pre-cal in high school because calculus wasn't taught. It doesn't mean that they were not bright and stellar students. What it means that it wasn't taught. That means they were not exposed to calculus. So these students may have to do a little building that calculus muscle before they're able to be successful. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I remember my school system in Kentucky was so poor my freshman year that we had to buy 2 textbooks out of our own pocket. However, I will give my school district credit in that I'm 60 years old, people. When I was in high school, I even had 2 years of physics, 2 years of chemistry. My physics professor had a PhD in physics. My math professor taught math at the local university. And my chemistry professor, when I did chemistry too, we used the same textbook as the local university. So I feel that I was very prepared to enter a college with in a STEM background, in a STEM field. Some of our students are not that fortunate, so sometimes we have to help them catch up. Oh, this is a big one. Student leader versus leader student. I always tell my students that there is no surprise why student appears in front of leader. Student should not come after leader, but before student, before leader. You see, students from underserved and underrepresented communities sometimes have this taxing burden on them. What I mean by that is they feel that they are expected to serve in leadership roles when it comes to serving their communities. For example, they may be in the African American Student Union. They may be in the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. They may be in the India Club. They may be in the Hillel. Some of these organizations are very small, and they may find themselves taking on two roles. They also may be a member of an NPHC or MCG fraternity or sorority, also serving two roles because, again, these organizations are very small. They have this sense of responsibility to do something for their community because they feel that the needs of those communities are not being met. And so as a result, they take on too much. So they'll find themselves, oh, I'm the president of this organization. I'm the vice president of this organization. I'm an officer and I hold two positions in my fraternity and sorority. And we always tell them to get involved in the greater Georgia Tech community. So they end up being a member or an officer in several other organizations as well. So they can be a part of Georgia Tech. Sometimes this is a little bit overwhelming. The stress level becomes high, and sometimes it's very difficult for them to move on. They get stuck, overwhelmed. That's when they come see one of us. Navigating text waters. I think I need to hit another. Okay, here we go. Here are some tips that I would like to share with you families. First of all, the Office of the Dean of Students, and I'm one of the deans, associate deans, who we work with students on class absences. It's always better if you can help your student have some excuses that can be documented. For example, your discharge papers from the doctor's office. If it's a flat tire, proof that the tire was repaired or AAA was called. Just some kind of proof that that's why they were out. It's always easier on the front end than the back end. Students come to us and say that there's something going on. There's a personal crisis going on. It is, sometimes we can get exams postponed or delayed or homework extended if we know as soon as possible, right? So that's why it's easier on the front end than the back end. We also let students know about drop day. Okay, let me go here, parents. Drop day. So drop day was, I think, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before. And students can drop a course or their entire classes. But let me say this, students are pressured not to drop classes. And I believe they're pressured to not dropping classes because of inaccurate information they have received somewhere down the line. Here's one example. There are many students who come to me who maybe have A's and B's in all their classes, but they may have a D or F in one. It's before drop date. And there's really no hope that they're going to pass that class with a C or better, right? But they have been told somewhere down the line, or they thought they have been told that if they get a W in that class, it'll ruin their chances of going to grad school, to go to medical school, whatever. That is not the case. That is not the case. That is not accurate. If someone asked them why they got that W, if they could say that I had a family emergency, my grandfather died, I was in the hospital, something happened, grad school's not going to penalize them for that. And I'm going to tell you what, if that grad school is going to penalize them for a family emergency or something like that, then that's a grad school that shouldn't be considered. I tell you, I write a lot of recommendations for professional programs. like med school, law school, graduate school. And they like students who've overcome something. They just don't like a student with straight A's. They like a student who's been challenged in some way, because for those of us who's been through grad school, we all know that grad school challenges us in some capacity. So they like students who are resilient. And while we're talking about resiliency, that's so important. If I can pinpoint 2 reasons why students are not successful at any university, it's because 1, they don't take advantage of the resources that are offered to them, and 2, they don't have resilience. So what I try to teach the students that I work with is to build that resiliency model. They've got to learn how to bounce back when something doesn't go their way. And we need parents, you need to teach them, we need to teach them and show them, etc. That's so important. We also have a process called petition to the faculty. If a student needs a special consideration, for example, suppose they need to withdraw after the deadline, there's a way that they can withdraw from school without academic penalty, meaning getting the D's and F's. They will get the W's, but I'm telling you, W's are better than D's and F's. We also have disability services for students who have been approved to have an ADA accommodation. And a lot of times, as someone who's used to supervise that office, what I have seen in the past, a lot of students had accommodations in high school. They want to start over. They don't want to start by going to the disability services office. A lot of times, those students are not successful. So please help us get your student to the disability services office when they get here. Register. You can register before they come. And you can register after they come. Even if they didn't register, I don't care if they're junior, senior, they can still register. That's ongoing. We have the Women's Resource Center. We have campus recreation. You saw the statistics on how many students did not even leave the house and exercise and work out during the pandemic. It's essential now. I'm going to share this. I gained a lot of weight during the pandemic. I'm on the keto diet. I am proud of myself. I have lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks. And I'm not going to stop until I reach my goal. It's all about getting fit, healthy body, healthy mind. There is a connection. We also have an ombudsman in academic affairs. We have a person that we work with. When a student has a conflict with a faculty member, that office is very helpful. We have the Dean Griffith Hip Pocket Fund. That is a grant or loan that is given out through the Dean of Students office. In case there's a financial emergency, small emergency, a student can get up to $1,000 and pay it back in 14 weeks. For graduate students, we have the Graduate Student Senate, the Black Graduate Student Association, and LOGROS. That is a graduate student association that historically served Hispanic, Latinx populations. We also have an LGBT graduate group. We have a graduate veterans group as well in the Scheller College of Business. We have the Veterans Resource Center, which is brand spanking new to Georgia Tech. Alumni gave to create this new Veterans Resource Center. It's awesome. I think we have now closer to 500 student organizations. For those students who are housing insecure or food insecure, we have Clemens Kitchen, we have a clothes closet. We actually have a kitchen where students can go pick up prepackaged meals and snacks. We already have the LGBTQI Resource Center. We have domestic partner services for our students, which primarily are our graduate students. I also want to share that we have Hispanic Initiatives, the Office of Hispanic Initiatives, and I included a link here. This is a link for a grant that was given to us by the CARES funding by the federal government. Students are allowed to submit a request for funding based on any emergency that they may be experiencing. And a student can get up to $2,500 with some documentation attached to prove that they do have this emergency going on. It's not limited to undergraduate students. Graduate students are eligible. International students are eligible. And I'm one of the approvers for this grant. We've given out a tremendous amount of money so far. And I'm very proud of how Georgia Tech has been helping our students. At this time, I am going to close this presentation and to see if any of you have any questions for me. Tyler, do I stop sharing? Let me see.
Yes, you can stop sharing. See, we got any questions?
While Tyler is looking, I have to say this about myself. I was a straight A student for a very long time. I didn't receive my first B until college, and it was devastating. And I see many students here do the same because we're kind of known for our grades. Like, my grades were part of my identity. And I remember when I first got my first B, I thought I was going to lose it, y'all. And my mother said to me, "We never told you that you had to get A's." And deep down inside, I thought that I was getting A's because my parents thought I required me to get A's, but it would never. She goes, "Stephanie, you put that expectation on yourself." She said, "Your father and I only asked you to do your best." And she said, "Did you do your best?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she goes, "Well, that's all we asked." So a lot of times I talk to students about their pressure, and we talk about who put the pressure on them. And a lot of students will identify that I put the pressure on myself.
We have a question about disability services, but I think they're still trying to type it and get it together. If a student wanted to meet with you, Dean Ray, or contact you via email just about diversity on campus, would you be open to that?
Absolutely. I love meeting with students. Like I said, I meet with 4 to 5 students every day for a plethora of reasons. I love to meet students, whether there's a problem or not. I always like to tell students, you don't have to come meet with, you don't have to have a problem to meet with me. In fact, I like to have those happy days, happy meetings every now and then. So absolutely, they could just email me at sray@gatech.edu, SRAY@gatech.edu.
Gotcha. And the question is, my son has a Georgia State issued disability sticker for parking. His car continues to get towed upon special events, so he'll probably need to contact Parking and Transportation directly.
Yes, we need to contact, work with disability services and see if something can be done with that. I have a disability permit as well, just so you know. And I know, even if I'm working for Georgia Tech, sometimes I have to move my car to a different location. But let's see if disability services and Dean Janarone and her staff can help that student a little bit more.
Perfect. Dean Ray, could you talk about just the benefits of maybe students on campus finding a mentor of their same race or just another underrepresented population or
Oh my goodness.
that sort?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I think, especially if you're from an underrepresented and underserved community, it is so important for a student to have a mentor that looks like them. Now, with that being said, it doesn't mean that all of their mentors have to look like them, right? But I think it's very important that students are able to find a mentor that looks like them. I remember being at Georgia Tech for a while, and this very brazen African-American woman walks into my office, like marches into my office, never seen her before. And she says, sits down in exhaustion, "Dean Ray, I need a mentor and you're going to be it." And I'm like looking at her like, I dare you. But it got to be it was a very successful mentor-mentee relationship. That woman actually became the first Black woman president of the Georgia Tech Student Government Association. And she ended up being a member of my sorority, and I keep up with her today. But it's very important. But sometimes, though, be careful. A mentor can be anyone. I will say that sometimes one of my secretaries, Dion, she may have more mentees than I do sometimes, because everybody stops in. They love Dion. She kind of mothers my students a little bit. And so it doesn't always have to be one like me. There's other people as well. But yes, I think mentors are important just when you enter as a first year, whether you're someone like, I have my mentors on campus and I'm 60. I think you always need mentors to help you have that continuous self-improvement. And plus, if you're a student, you're going to need people to write those recommendation letters for you, besides faculty sometimes.
Yeah. And I think just going into that too is also good, even if you don't necessarily have a mentor right out, just to kind of go to on-campus events and just get out, explore, socialize, because you never know who you'll meet of different races, different backgrounds. I think that for me personally, that was good when I was in college to kind of just get out and meet different people from different places and kind of help just build relationships, kind of just helps you get a sense of belonging on campus.
Absolutely. Networking, also trying to get to know other people in your classroom, trying to form study groups with different people, right? I think those are very important. Just get out. I'm working with a student, I'm coaching a student right now who didn't get out last year. One of the things we've been working on is him getting out, and he's got out and he's made friends, and he's having the time of his life. His grades have improved, and he checks in with me every other week. I need to watch him a little bit closely this semester, but so far things are going really well with that student because he got out, Tyler.
Yeah.
He got out of his room. COVID was hard on it. Like I said, COVID was hard on everybody.
Mm-hmm. We have another mom says, do you have any suggestions for how to encourage my student to advocate and seek resources? He is introverted and shy.
Yeah, that's a number of our students. My advice is you can call or email someone like me on campus, let me know what's going on, and then I call the student and say, oh, someone on our campus is concerned about you or worried about you. Or sometimes I lie and say we do mid-semester check-ins with students, and I'm just checking in on you. You have to be creative to get to some of these students. So yeah, let's work together, Mom, on how to get your students to engage in this help-seeking behavior, which is so critical to success. We can do it together.
And what was your email again? Well, again, Dean Ray, I'm going to type it in the chat for everybody.
SRAY@godtech.edu.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much for taking the time out your schedule to meet with us, Dean Ray, and just kind of have a great conversation. Please know that this will be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel within 24 hours, just in case you want to refer back to it or share it with another family member or a friend. Please feel free to do so. If you have any questions for Dean Ray, I dropped her email address in the chat, or if you'd like to reach out to us as well, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much. Have a great day and go Jackets.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming.